All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Berry Aftercare podcast. And I know I say this all the time, but I'm excited about this episode. But this is a more excited episode. And it's because I have a woman on today who's going to be our guest. And she has written one of the best books. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I told her, you're going to think I'm blowing smoke up your rear, but I mean it. This book called Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors is one of the best books that I have read in this industry. So I could not wait to have the author, Diane Petrella, on with us today. So she is here live with us for today's podcast episode. Hi, Diane.
Oh, hi, Connie. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very appreciative and honored to be here. And thank you for your beautiful and kind words.
Listen, when I saw this book, I was like, why haven't I seen this before? And then I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I like highlighted the whole thing. And I have been talking to the people in the Berry Aftercare program about what an amazing read this is. And I'm going to incorporate some of the quotes. I'm going to quote you in this class that I do online called Gain While You Lose, because what you have to say here is put into language that people can understand, first of all. And it is written from the heart and it touches the heart and it can really help people understand how to free themselves truly from this burden of emotional eating. And I think in the world of at least bariatric medicine, where I have spent most of my career, which is a little bit different than where you've spent most of
Right.
yours, is that there's not enough emphasis on the psychological aspects of healing from the disease of obesity. And when people have bariatric surgery, a lot of the preparation is just about what you're supposed to eat afterwards. And I tell people all the time when I do the pre surgical evaluation, weight loss surgery does not treat emotional eating.
Right. Right.
So I'm so grateful to have found your book and to be talking with you today. So let's hear a little bit about your professional journey and what led
Mhm.
you to the creation and the authoring of this book.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for your feedback about my book and really capturing the essence of it. My goal was to write something that's just an easy language that people can understand and implement in their lives. And I appreciate you sharing it with the people you work with. I am a clinical social worker. My graduate degree is it's a Master of Social Work degree. My first job many years ago after graduate school, I've been practicing almost 40 years, which
Wow,
sounds kind
beautiful.
of something. I don't even know.
That
40
sounds
years
knowledgeable, is what it sounds.
seems like a long time, and it also feels like yesterday, honestly. But so I'm almost 40 years. But in any event, I was originally trained as a child therapist. And my internships in school, at least one of the two, was working with children that were abused and neglected. And my
Mm,
first job was designed to help co develop with the other therapist who I worked with. Again, this is back in the 80s. So it was to design the first child sexual abuse program in Rhode Island.
wow, that's
You
a
know,
big
back
task.
Yeah, back then it was really just beginning to be acknowledged that this even happens in families. A lot of what
Right,
we did was incest. Um,
right.
Obviously, also abuse from people who were offenders who were outside of the family. So did, we got this program together, and I also did a lot of teaching and training, worked with the Department of Children and Families with Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So those early years were primarily around working with children, but also adults who had been molested. I also worked with perpetrators. And it was just a comprehensive program. And I loved, loved, loved doing this work. At this point, I no longer work with children. I stopped about 20 years ago, and I do only work with adults at this point. Just as you evolve in
Right,
your career and whatnot, I just stopped
right.
working with children. But during that time of working with children, adolescents, and adults, it wasn't only sexual abuse that I worked with because there are also multi problems when it comes to sexual abuse, but also, I saw children from other kinds of abusive and neglectful backgrounds, and then also adults with that as their history. But during that time, I saw a lot of children, teenagers, and adults who used food for comfort. They used food to soothe themselves. And granted, many of them may also have used other kinds of substances.
Right.
But it
Right.
was the first time I started working with um, how the need to self soothe was so powerful. And for children and teenagers, an easy, accessible substance is food. And I worked at that time with a very astute dietitian who was aware that the people she saw for weight loss, she would do a history with them when she learned that they experienced, whether it was sexual abuse or some other kind of trauma. She understood that I can't just work with you talking about dealing with food or nutritional plans without you addressing these themes that came up during her history taking. So she would refer to me, and we worked together. And that's really when it started, way back when.
I love
Um,
that. What a great combination, right? A combination of the therapy and the dietitian
yes,
and the insight that each of you had to
exactly.
understand that. And my frustration sometimes comes because I work with such a vast, multidisciplinary team, and there are so many people schooled in other areas who aren't given that piece in their training, including the bariatric surgeons,
Yeah,
that
you mean
there's
their history, about a patient's history.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yes. And they don't understand, like the surgeon may not understand, or the dietitian may not understand, or the exercise person may not understand that there's this emotional component. And I love what you said, the self-soothing aspect that children naturally turn to because it's available to them,
right.
and they don't even necessarily make the connection at that time that food is helping them to soothe.
Exactly, exactly. And they learn pretty quickly that eating certain foods or eating certain quantities of food just helps them feel better. And they may not know why. They may not know what they're needing to feel better about. I mean, after a while, some children or teens, and certainly adults that I work with, reflecting on their past, were pretty clear that at some point they would hoard food or save it in their room because they knew that it was like their friends. They knew that that would just help them feel better. And, as I said, food, unless a family is where there's food that may be scarce, if there's food insecurity, food is generally something that kids can access either easily at home or with not a lot of money at the corner store.
Absolutely.
And, they may later rely on other kinds of substances, people who are traumatized, on other kinds of substances, cigarettes, alcohol, other drugs, etc. But oftentimes, it's not unusual that it may start with food because of the accessibility of it for young kids and teens.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, when you progressed with your work, and when I do the pre-surgical evaluations with people getting ready to have weight loss surgery, sometimes there is not a connection. Like you mentioned, sometimes people make that connection and they realize that I'm going to store away food because that is my go-to place. It's where I feel happiest. But there are a lot of people with whom I work, especially prior to having surgery, who don't make a connection to their childhood and any kind of trauma. In other words, they don't even recognize that they've experienced neglect or abuse. Have you found that to be true in the work that you do as well?
Well, it's a little different for me because people are seeking out my help as a psychotherapist because of some kind of pain in their life.
Okay.
And, versus I have a physical need or a physical ailment that they're seeing a
Mhm.
medical person about. So when somebody meets with me, even if they're not coming to me with the identifying problem as emotional eating, I always take a history. And because of my experience with childhood trauma, I'm also taking a history where I ask questions about someone's upbringing. I ask questions about parental discipline. I ask questions about bullying. I ask questions about sexual abuse, in a gentle way. But I pretty much the first or second session will do a comprehensive history. And if people aren't aware just by how they may respond back to me that they're aware that there's a connection, and many people may not, they think, well, that was a long time ago. It doesn't affect me now.
Right.
I will
Right.
do psychoeducation, which for your listeners basically means educating people around the psychological effects of certain childhood experiences. And it's not just those experiences. I'll also explore who, if anyone, did they have to help them if they were sad, scared, in danger. So it's what
Exactly.
happened to somebody, and then either the support or the lack of support that they may have had. And then I will explain how that can impact people later in lives, and then open it up. I wonder, how do you think that might affect, how that might relate to you?
I
Does
love
this
that story.
resonate? And see how they might begin to make the connection. But they're not going to make the connection if I don't start planting seeds and give them information. Without the information, you may not know that there's a connection.
Absolutely. And I find that to be very, very true, especially with the people that I work with. Some of them don't understand when they think abuse, they think obviously sexual abuse, and they
Right.
think, well, that didn't happen to me. But they may not understand that constant criticism or, constantly being bullied or seeing parents physically fight or seeing a sibling being abused, or they may not understand that that also has some of those same effects as sexual abuse can have on children.
Absolutely. And, trauma, there's a range of traumatic experiences. And I use that word in a very general way. There's a study that was done in the 90s around adverse childhood experiences and the effects later on. People can look that up under ACEs.
So
And
good.
that's also, divorce and how a child processes the breakup of their family or not seeing a parent. So there's a range of childhood experiences that I may call traumatic, but trauma isn't always abuse. You know,
Right. Right.
children may not be abused, but they may be dealing with a depressed parent, maybe, or like I said, a divorce, even in the best of situations where parents may say all the right things and handle it really well. It still may feel traumatizing for a child. Any experience that is beyond their level of being able to manage it easily, and they're just painful experiences, um,
Exactly. In
with,
this
with,
class, in
with
this class
no ill intent. I'm sorry.
in this class that I do, I go over this whole range of, like you said, it doesn't have to be abuse, but I love how you define that. I want to repeat that for the listeners, just because people don't understand that a traumatic event is anything that is beyond your ability to cope with it. And so when you ask, did you have anybody to help you deal with your sister moving away to college and you're left at home with the alcoholic parent, or
Right.
your best friend moving away, or somebody in your class passing away, or anything that's traumatizing. So thank you for bringing that up.
Exactly.
So when you talk about how a child does deal with trauma, you know, you've gone over in the book. The book, again, is called Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. But when you talk about it, I love how you explain it. What's your most generalized explanation of how children, particularly, cope with trauma? There's a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Well, to to start with answering that, I'll talk about how, very briefly, how trauma impacts the brain and nervous system. So
Yes,
if a child is in either an abusive situation or chronically painful situation without appropriate supports, their their body and their nervous system may always be on high alert, always on edge. There's that, the stress response that people may be familiar with: fight, flight, freeze. which often in abusive situations, when you think about it, if you're in a dangerous situation as an adult, you may try to fight back, although there are situations where you can't do that even as adults. But children, how often can children do that with a larger teenager or an adult?
Right. Not
Can't
happy.
always flee. They can't run away from, although teenagers may run away from a dangerous family situation. But when you're younger, you're not going to do that.
Right.
And if you're frightened at home, whether it's because of abuse or you're seeing your parents argue, or you're scared because your sibling is getting upset with you, you may freeze your body. Certainly with sexual abuse, you may freeze your body. After a series of chronic experiences where you're on high alert like that, and the stress response is activated in either fight, flight, or freeze, and children can't really fight back or flee, they're stuck in this almost like high alert. Their body is hyper aroused or what's called dysregulated. They may be feeling anxious. There's no way to express some of that if you're in a dangerous or not even dangerous, but in a frightening situation.
Right.
Even if you're not in danger, it's still scary to speak out, perhaps. And I know there's so many ranges of experiences. But after a while, and if there isn't a safe adult to talk to or to offer acknowledgement that they may have been afraid or upset, some
Right.
acknowledgement of what they may have just experienced, their body may stay on this hyper alert, and the brain and body, nervous system, stays in this hyper alert state so that later on, I'm really generalizing it, but later on, even small stresses may feel really big
Right.
because you're already on some level of high alert or dissociated from what's going on around you, which is sort of the opposite in some ways of high alert. You're really shut down and numb emotionally to what's happening. Even in your life later as adults, um, stressful situations might cause somebody to just whoop, shut down and
Yeah.
deal with it in a detached way. Other people will become hyper aroused and become anxious very easily.
And I
Um,
think it's important for listeners to understand that that point that you're making, even if as a child you survive whatever your environment is, and even if it's not the worst of the worst, but if you were on edge when dad came home because you don't know what's going to happen with mom or dad, or if there was a teen in the house and there was all kinds of hell breaking loose in the house and you were just on edge all the time, even those kinds of things can have a big effect on you as an adult. And so many times people don't make that connection. It's like you said earlier, that was in the past, it's not in the present. But a lot of times if you still have that, quick to react as an adult, or you shut down very quickly, it's oftentimes related to what happened in the past, but you're not aware of it.
exactly. And really, through educating oneself about the effects of childhood trauma, people will begin to see, oh, that makes sense now. Oh, now I understand why I get angry so easily, or why
Yeah.
I might lash out at my child when they didn't really do anything wrong. And that's not unusual too, with our loved ones.
Mhm.
So this happens because trauma, the physiological effects of trauma, stay stored in the body. The nervous system remembers, the body remembers. Even if somebody has repressed some experiences and they really don't recall what happened to them, it's pushed away. Or even if they do, they may not, as we were saying, recognize the impact, but their body remembers.
Right.
The body remembers with visceral sensations that may get activated, that sinking feeling in the gut, tension, a flushed face if you're feeling easily ashamed or guilty. So there's all different ways the muscle tension, headache. So all different ways the body may respond, even to minor stress, because it's activating stress that's been carried for a long time. I'd like to add too that in terms of that stress reaction that I mentioned, fight, flight, free, when there's the immediacy of
Right.
of a traumatic situation, there's a fourth stress response um, called fawn, and that is a behavioral stress response. The term is coined by Pete Walker in his book on complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And when you think about what it's like when someone may fawn all over someone, that word, you are wanting them to like you, you want them to admire you, you're trying to cozy up to somebody, so to speak.
Mhm.
Children, so that's a term to use, that's a behavioral response to chronic stress, where children are trying to please or appease a parent or any adult in their life. It could be teachers, it could be um, camp counselors, it could be the older teenagers, but pleasing and appeasing behaviors. People are familiar with the term people pleasing. That is another, can be a stress response, as Pete Walker calls fawn, that started really very early in childhood.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because until I had read your book, I was like, what is this? I
Yeah,
hadn't heard that term. And I loved it because so many people will say, I'm a people pleaser. I'm a people pleaser. And when you think about emotional eating, it's I don't want any conflict. I don't want to deal with any conflict. I don't want anybody to feel. So if I sense conflict, I immediately want to eat. I
right.
immediately want to eat. If I think somebody's upset with me because I'm a people pleaser, I find myself turning to food, but they may not make that connection.
Exactly. And, I'd like listeners to be aware of that, because I think the anger and resentment that people experience when they do something they really don't want to do, they're saying yes when they really mean no, but they're afraid to say no. The anger and resentment that can't be, you're unable to set your boundary, and you're holding on to that. And food is that, I think, when people engage in people pleasing behaviors, like you said, that's a significant emotional eating trigger, because we're losing self agency when you're doing something chronically. When that's your pattern, you're not
Mhm.
living a life that feels powerful. And
So,
food is a way to numb the feelings around that, anger or resentment, or um, the upset around it.
so a couple things that I want to just reinforce that you've said that I think are really, really important. And one was how the body stores the nervous system memories, right? So you may be, as an adult, somewhere and you hear a voice that sounds harsh and critical and mean, and it sounds to you like your father when you were a child. And you don't even recognize why, but all of a sudden you're anxious and you're wanting to soothe and you're reaching for food. So there are
Right,
these triggers constantly happening that may be within or not within your awareness. But when
right,
you can learn to recognize what's going on with you, and we'll get to that in just a minute, then you can start self soothing your own emotions that were not tended to or you didn't learn to as a child. But the other thing that you just said was we have a plethora of adults who are struggling to set boundaries for themselves in their
right,
adult lives. Like, I struggle to say no to my mom, or I struggle to say no when somebody asks me to do something. And
mm,
there's not an awareness all the time that maybe that started as a child because it wasn't safe for you to speak up or you didn't have an opportunity to voice your opinion or your thoughts. And then you develop this resentment or you develop this internal rage. Or as an adult, you may be like, I do everything for everybody. I'm the one who people come to all the time. I'm the fixer. And I do so much for other people than they do for me. And you become resentful. That is a
right.
huge trigger for emotional eating.
No,
Huge trigger.
no. What I'd like to add to that is, one thing that can be helpful is to, through understanding how the body reacts to early trauma, and then when you're triggered by, say, something, your boss says or a loved one says and you or a friend says and you react, to try to, and this is a process, and it takes time, but to separate out the feelings in your body based on what may have happened in the past and being triggered today. You may still need to address a conflict or an issue, even if it's not a conflict, may feel like that because it's hard sometimes to assert oneself, but to separate out today's issue from the feeling that got triggered from the past, because when emotions are out of proportion, that's often an indication that it's not about your boss. It's not about, it may not even be about your mother today, even though there may be reverberations of that.
Right.
But today's problems and issues may be bringing up the enormity in your body and in your mind about things from the past. And it's important to begin to separate out, okay, even though I'm reacting this way, it's my inner child who's reacting. How can I respond differently? And again, this takes a while to tease out.
It
Uh,
does.
but it's not always about today, even though something happened today, but to
Right.
separate out. And one thing I say to my clients is, especially around people pleasing and being afraid to set boundaries, when you start doing that, you will probably feel guilty. You'll probably feel upset with yourself. You'll probably feel like you're doing something wrong. So I often say, as you're working on this, to say to yourself, even though I feel guilty, it doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. This is just a feeling from a long time ago.
I love that.
And do it even if you feel guilty. Now, it may take a while to get there, but people do get there.
Yes, and I love that you're bringing that up. And I chuckled because 2 episodes from now, I'm doing a podcast episode called Individuation. Can you say no to your parents without feeling guilty?
Oh, perfect. Yes.
So yes, and that is a very difficult thing. If you've not had the experience or if you haven't learned how to do it, it is very difficult when you start setting boundaries. And that's one of the things that people have to learn after having weight loss surgery, because
Mhm,
a lot of times people will offer them food, or they'll offer them things and they won't understand, why can't you just have some of this? And they don't understand. So learning to say, I appreciate the offer, but I'm choosing my health right now.
mhm,
Learning statements like that without going, "Oh my God, my parents gonna hate me," or if I say, "No, grandma, I'm not gonna eat your special dessert, she'll hate me," that
mhm.
sort of thing. So learning these skills of the fancy word individuation,
Right,
or setting healthy boundaries, or separating yourself emotionally from, the people who have had, a lot of power over you in the
right.
past is
And
a
even people who don't have a lot of power over you, it can be
yes.
hard to say no or set limits, just generally when that's been, a core sort of belief inside of you, or a fear of just not wanting to disappoint people or have them, um, be upset with you. It can be so internalized that it's not only with people who you have an emotional relationship. And
Absolutely.
it's important too to look at boundary setting as a way that you're really taking care of your body, perhaps, depending on what the situation is, but you're taking care of that child inside of you that may not have had choices available to them. And you're able to bring that choice to them now to make a response that's for them, not just the adult that you are, but what does that child that you once were need from you? They
I
need
love
they need you to stand up for them in ways perhaps people weren't able to stand up for them years ago.
So
And
part of healing from emotional eating then is learning to comfort yourself and give your child, your inner child, who needed maybe some soothing, or who needed some words of compassion, or who needed the feeling word. It seems like you're feeling really sad right now. you
right,
know so the healing from emotional eating comes from learning to identify the emotions and
yeah,
learning to self-soothe. So I want you to talk about something that I read in your book that honestly I thought is one of the best tools a person can use. And I've not heard it explained the way you explained it. You refer to it as the sacred shawl. And this
Oh,
one
yes,
touched me so much. So this is part of the healing from emotional eating. So can you please explain
sure.
your idea of the sacred shawl?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't think of bringing my shawl with me, but so I call it sacred shawl because, well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. You would a shawl when you wrap yourself up in a shawl and say put your arms around yourself, you're able to give yourself this beautiful hug. And a shawl, think of like a baby in a papoose. They feel protected and secure, and there's something very secure about, why people may purchase weighted blankets. It's soothing to the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So having a shawl, and the beauty about a shawl is nobody really needs to know why you're using it, and you could be upset or anxious or sad and wrap yourself in a shawl, and no one has to know. It's just a fashion accessory, and even a light one in the summer. Excuse me, in the summertime. So I suggest this to people as a way of self-soothing and comforting themselves. Just wrap yourself up in your shawl, give yourself a hug, and stay there breathing diaphragmatically from belly breathing. And if you're able to sit for several moment or a moment or several minutes, to do the best you can to just settle your body, hold yourself in your shawl, give yourself a hug. Why I call it sacred shawl is I guide people in my book and clients to say a little prayer before using your shawl. You decide, you find a beautiful shawl that you'd like, or several that you could take with you places, of varying kind of fabrics, light for summer, heavier for winter. You'd wrap yourself in your shawl. And I ask people to connect with whatever one's belief in a higher power may be, whether it's God or consciousness or spirit. I have an audio guided visualization in my book that guides people through connecting what I call your wise self, which is our intuition, our higher consciousness, that part of us that loves us unconditionally, spirit really loves us unconditionally, always wants what's best for us, and is always guiding us. We just need to take the time and open ourselves to hearing those messages that are always inside of us, those intuitive whispers that may be hard to um, to even understand when that's coming because of chaos or trauma-based thoughts in one's mind. So there's a way to connect with that wise self, and through this guided visualization I have. But in terms of the sacred shawl, to connect with your wise self or whoever your higher power is, wrap yourself in your shawl. And I have a script in the book, but it's basically saying, thanking your higher power for being there with you, and asking, praying, when I feel scared, help me feel safe. When I feel worried, help me feel at peace. So to guide through a prayer where you're infusing the shawl with this love energy.
Yes.
So then when you're wrapping yourself up in your shawl, you're not just hugging yourself, your higher, wiser self, or your um, spirit is also there with you.
And what a great tool. Okay, so I feel like I need some food, and I've made this awareness that I'm an emotional eater. So I'm going to grab my shawl, connect myself to my spirit, and stay put and say, you know what? My wiser self, understands that I do not need food for this. I need to be with myself and learn to comfort myself. And so, just kind of as a tool to refrain from the emotional eating, keep yourself safe, give yourself the self compassion, connect to your wiser energy, and be with yourself and learn that you can work through the difficult emotions.
Yeah, I'm going to elaborate on that too, because the why the sacred shawl, it's something to use not only when you're upset, to think of it as just like
Mm,
you might have a cup of tea because, oh, I'm taking a 10-minute self-soothing break. So it's
love
not
that.
only to use when you're upset. Think of it as just a self-nurturing tool to use
I love that.
often during the day. And I also want to add something that, so yes, certainly when somebody's triggered and you have your shawl with you, it's a beautiful way of not only calming your body, but helping you not feel alone, that your higher power is there with you, because it becomes symbolic of that after you do your prayer and begin to use it on a regular basis. Maybe if people meditate, they meditate with their shawl. If they're sitting reading a book, any kind of a book or a book of inspirational messages, wear your shawl. So it begins to be associated with self love, self compassion. I have some clients who'll wear it in our sessions.
I love that.
I, it's a great way. Then it's as soon as you see it, sometimes you'll begin to um, almost start feeling a sense of
Yes.
safety and security because of
That is
what it
beautiful.
symbolizes. And
I
I
love
also want to say that it's not only to be used to try not to eat when you're not necessarily physically hungry. And one of the things I say in the book, actually, I think it's not, I think it's a whole chapter, is healing emotional eating is the key to healing emotional eating is not about not emotionally eating. It's not about being able to say, oh, I didn't emotionally eat today. I didn't emotionally eat this week. I didn't emotionally eat for a month.
right.
It's not about not emotionally eating. It truly is about how you handle it when you do emotionally eat.
I love that because people are going to do it.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Healing doesn't mean it stops entirely, and that's okay.
Yes.
Maybe it goes from using food 100% of the time and you're triggered 100% of the time down to being feeling triggered 80% of the time and of 80% intensity and using food 80% of the time down to 50, 60, 30. But maybe you'll always be triggered. It won't
Right.
always be to the same degree. It won't always be as frequent. And even if you turn to food 20 to 30% of the time in your life or 40, you can live successfully with that. It's
Yes.
okay.
Oh,
The
I love that you brought that up.
the important thing is how you talk to yourself and how you treat yourself after you've used food to cope, after you've emotionally eaten. Giving yourself words of love and self compassion and self acceptance, that is what's key. Like, okay, I ate more than my body feels comfortable. And, I wish I didn't do that because I'm feeling not so great right now in my body, but I'm working on this. It's okay. I'm doing the best I can. It's not a sin. I can let this go. Just whatever you might want to say to a child who's beating themselves up for thinking they made a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's not a sin. You're doing the best you can. And when you give yourself self love and kindness, um, you're not only giving that to the adult that you are, you're giving that to the child that you were and that you still are because you're carrying that child inside of you. So instead of beating yourself up with harsh words, I say lift yourself up with kindness, self love, and self acceptance. That's the key.
Okay. I'm just going to summarize that. The
Okay.
key is not extinguishing this behavior because it most likely will never be extinguished fully, but making progress. But when you do emotionally eat or anything else that you're trying to improve on in your life, the kindness and the words that you use that are self-soothing, that are compassionate, that aren't bullying or blaming or shaming or critical. That is so important. Learning self compassion, and engaging in self talk that is healing for both yourself as a child and yourself as an adult.
Right. And it's not, I mean, it's really powerful because what you're doing is you're stopping the pattern of perpetuating guilt and shame that are two key emotional states that and beliefs. I am bad. That's what shame is. Feeling like I'm a bad person. Guilt is I did something bad. Many children who, not all kinds of trauma, but certainly abuse, struggle with that in adulthood. It's very easy to feel guilt and shame. And when you begin to bring self compassion to how you think about and how you respond to episodes of emotional eating, you're not only healing emotional eating, you're healing from the trauma you experienced when you were, or the abuse you experienced when you were a child. You're doing both. And one thing that perpetuates emotional eating is when guilt and shame gets triggered. Obviously, other difficult emotions too. But once you begin to give yourself that love and compassion that you may not have had when you were younger, you're healing on such a deep and profound level where it's not about the food, it's about what's inside of your heart and in your body with how its trauma stays stored in the body. It's really, really important, and it can create large breakthroughs for people when they recognize that giving themselves that love and compassion is more important than whether or not they emotionally ate.
Wow. Did you hear that, everybody? Giving yourself that love and compassion is more important than whether or not you emotionally ate. That is so true. And those are such beautiful words. And learning kind, compassionate self talk. We talk about this all the time in Bari Aftercare. And having somebody who's worked in this field like you for these many years, and specifically with emotional eating and trauma and abuse, hearing that from you is just so reinforcing and affirming. And you said something in the book, you wrote this, and I love this, is that self talk is so important, as well as remembering you are no longer that vulnerable child. I had a therapist tell me early on in my own healing process that, Connie, you know, you don't ever have to be in that position again. You are no longer in that position. And remembering that you are no longer that vulnerable child, but you are an adult and you have choices that, and you put it this way, that you may not have had as a child.
Right.
Children have very limited choices in
That's true.
situations.
Right. And, just to say to your listeners, I mean, that is so true. And it is a process. It takes time to get to that point, to that place where you can more easily use your self talk in a kind and compassionate way and be gentle with yourself for that too. Because when your body is in a state of re experiencing that trauma, it can be difficult to call in from the rational part of your brain to say, wait a minute, this isn't about today. It's about a long time ago because your body's feeling it now. So just give yourself patience. It does take time. And even, changing your self talk, it is easier said than done. I strongly suggest to people to get therapeutic support because it's a hard road. Healing from emotional eating can be difficult on one's own. Certainly, dealing from childhood trauma is. And, many of your listeners have dealt with earlier in their lives dealing with such hard situations by themselves. They don't have to be alone with it anymore. Clearly, they have your support. And if they need other supports, it's important to get that. They don't have to do it by themselves anymore.
Absolutely. And I remind people very often that nobody can do this for you, but you don't have to do it alone.
Exactly.
You can have the help and the support and the guidance and the affirmation, so that when you're in a situation and you think you've failed, because you gave into emotional eating or you reacted in some way that doesn't serve you well in your life. Because, like you just said, even as an adult, when you get triggered, you're in that, you want to fight, flight,
That's
freeze, or fawn. So it
right.
takes a lot of work to pull on those emotions and go, wait a minute, I don't have to do that anymore. I
Right.
don't have to. I can make a different choice. This is a long process sometimes.
Absolutely is. And, I'd like to also say to your listeners that emotional eating is not a personal failing. It is not a lack of willpower, and you're not doing anything wrong. It's actually a very resourceful coping mechanism that for many people they may have learned early in childhood or adolescence. And if they didn't, they started later. I would wonder what else they used earlier to cope. But it's
Exactly.
a it's a survival mechanism. So
Right.
honor yourself for doing the best you could, for wanting to soothe yourself and to take care of yourself in the best way that you knew at the time. And
Exactly.
you're trying to take care of yourself. It's not a personal failing. It's certainly not a lack of willpower. Just do the best you can with the resources available to you. And it's a process. It takes time. Have patience. Have
And
patience.
even as you talk to yourself as a child, talk to your child self, it's like, thank you for finding something that helped you survive.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
be grateful that you had the resourcefulness to find something to keep you sane while you got through that situation. And then remind yourself gently and kindly, I no longer need this. I do have other choices today.
Yes. And I no longer need this in the way that I needed it before.
I love that in the way that I needed it
You
before.
don't need to give something up 100%. Sometimes people do. There's a
Mhm.
whole other section I have, in the book about how to deal with certain foods that may feel like they have such power over you. But this is all a choice. You don't need to give anything up. It's when you develop the inner resources, you can have more flexibility about
Right.
how you want to handle your stress level, how you want to deal with food, the kind of relationship you want to deal with food.
I
Have
love
it.
that you put in the book too, because this is a thing that I talk about a lot. For the majority of people, nothing has to be given up. There are some people who say, you know what? This never ends well for me. It may be in my best interest to make this a choice. Not that anybody's saying you can never. You might say, you know what, for me, my choice is to refrain from this particular thing. But it doesn't have to be that way for everybody.
Right. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. It's because it's different for everyone. And while there's a perspective where all foods need to be quote legalized, and that there's obviously an important aspect of that, that you can eat whatever you want to eat. It's your free choice. There are some times when some people feel that they want to keep certain foods out of their home, at least out of their home. Maybe they eat them when they're at a restaurant or someplace else, but they choose, to
Right.
them it's more empowering not to. And many people and many professionals I'll hear talk about how, well, you don't want to quote deprive yourself. And I kind of take issue with that word when it's used with food, because there are many people have to refrain from eating certain foods, like if you have celiac disease, like if you have certain
Allergies.
allergies or sensitive, exactly. And people don't necessarily feel like they're being deprived. They're taking care of themselves. And
Oh, I
I
love
bring that same approach to clients who may feel that if they have pasta too often, or if they have potato chips at home, or if those trigger foods, high fat, sugar, salty kinds of things. Some people choose to think of it as, I don't feel that I'm not depriving myself if they're not in my home. I feel that I'm taking care of myself. And that's okay. That's all right.
that.
As I often say to clients, real deprivation is not having food at all. Let's not give a candy bar that kind of power over you.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
In any deprivation people feel, if they do feel like there's some level of emotional deprivation, if they want to eat a certain food and they think they quote shouldn't, oftentimes that feeling of deprivation, it's not about the food. It's the emotional deprivation they experienced when they were children and teens. But it gets projected. And unfortunately, I think some professionals may do that too. They put it on the food. It's
Yeah.
not the food, it's the feeling you may have when there's something you want or a way of being in the world that you, safety being one of them, and that
Mhm.
hasn't happened, you'll feel a level of emotional deprivation, or if people aren't there for you. But there's a way you can expand your thinking about food. So it's really a free choice whether to have anything you want at home or to put some boundaries around it. That's okay too.
I love this.
Okay.
Okay, one thing I'd like you to talk about is because there are a lot of people who talk about, they're very negative towards your body, a lot of negative body talk. You talk about offering your body support, which I
Oh,
love.
yes. Yeah. Um, Many people obviously are aware of the approach of body positivity or the belief in body positivity. And obviously, that's important. It's um, empowering to feel positive about one's body. But not everybody feels that way. And sometimes it's too hard to get to that place of being body positive or feeling positively about your body if you don't. And that's okay. You feel what you feel about your body, whatever that is. Let that be okay. What's important to be aware of is what you might do with some harsh feelings towards your body so that you're not taking it out on your body. But what I talk about is if you can't embrace a body positive approach, that is okay. Most likely you can embrace a body supportive approach. And what that means is being able to say to yourself, okay, I may not love my body, but I can take good care of it. I may not like my body, but I can give it the the healthy foods it needs, the movement it needs. I may not love how my body looks, but I can take good care of it so that it stays vibrant and healthy for me as I walk through this world with my body being the way that I experience the richness of life. So even if you don't feel positive about your body, most people can get around the belief and embrace a belief that I can still take good care of it. Taking good care of your body isn't predicated on feeling a certain way about it.
Hello, say that again.
Taking good care of your body and supporting your body isn't predicated on how you feel about it.
Right.
So no
So I
matter,
may not like my thighs. I may not like my double chin. I may not like the size of my waist, but I can take good care of my body.
yes, all those things. I may not like this, I may not like that, and I'm going to give it the rest and sleep it needs. And no matter what I eat, I will make sure it's given the nutrients that it needs. I may not love my body, and I will give it the movement that it needs. Um, I may have just repeated myself, but giving it, oh no, sleep, nourishment, movement,
I
um,
see.
to wear clothes that you feel good in, no matter how you feel about your body, supporting it that way. So, supporting your body, it's not mutually exclusive. You feel a certain way, whatever that way is, that's okay. Your body does need your support.
I love that so much. When I read that, I thought, wow, this is revolutionary. Seriously. It's a mind shift. It's a shift in how you think about, because so many people, you got to love your body. Well, that is not going to happen for a lot of people. It's
That's right. And it can make it hard to say those words one might say if they're trying to adopt a body positive
oh,
approach. If it's
yes.
not true, it's
Yeah.
not going to really resonate. And you could say even you don't you could say this, even if someone can't say, I love my body. And I say this with clients, if that's something that's hard to say, I want to love my body, or I want to like my body.
Listen, I've been married 40 years. I don't always like my husband, but I can still support my husband, right?
I hear you.
So,
Exactly. And we have a relationship with our bodies.
yes,
Our bodies have a consciousness of its own, the way I look at it. And certainly every thought we think, it produces some kind of physiological response in our body. Our minds and bodies are connected. And I try to help my clients get to a place where they're thinking about their body as a very real, live, breathing relationship. It's a relationship. One of the things I suggest in my book is to one of three different practices that I talk about is taking your body for a walk.
I
And
love
this isn't about exercise. It's not about, it is movement, but it's not for the sake of move your body. It's for the sake of deepening your relationship with your body. So I suggest 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, however much time somebody has, but say 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. And I don't like to have rules. Not everybody can do something like this every day, but as
right.
often as you can in the week, take your body on a date.
I
Take
love it.
your body on a walking date. Ideally, you're walking in a natural, beautiful environment, but not everybody can do that, and that's okay too. Just taking your body on a walk and talk to it.
Love
Talk
it.
to it as if you're with a friend. And even if it says, all right, this sounds kind of silly, but we're going on a walk together. And you just start and you just walk and talk to your body. This is really good for you. This movement and walking, I know, is healthy for you. And use some words of affirmations regarding thankfulness and gratitude. Thank you for letting me walk if somebody's able bodied. Thank you
Yeah.
for letting me see these trees. Thank you for my heart beating. Or just simply say, thank you, body, for allowing me to experience the richness of life. And
Yes.
just say that once if it's too hard to get to a place of more involved gratitude. But you're connecting with your body. And for people who've experienced childhood trauma, it may be hard to tune into their body because of these trauma-based sensations that may feel uncomfortable, these unsettling sensations in the body. And when you're moving, it's a way that energy can move around. It may feel a little easier to be with your body when you're moving, when you're walking. So it's just simply a way of beginning to connect with your body as if it's a one of your best friends.
And you wrote in your book, and I love this too, that all healthy relationships are about trust and mutual respect and support. And so when you think about having this relationship with your body, because you can't separate yourself from it,
Right.
you know, it's important that we have that trust, and we treat our bodies with trust, and we say kind things to ourselves and support ourselves in that way. And we are running out of time, so I just want to ask you, um, to talk very briefly about, you wrote about thinking about yourself in a new way, not like the negative things you've thought about yourself, but who you want to become.
Right, right. And that's just a good question to ask oneself. Who do I want to be in the world? Just simply reflecting on that question. I would suggest people write about that. Journal it, using journal writing. Who do I want to be? Do I want to be somebody who feels confident in his or her choices? Do I want to be somebody who takes good care of themselves? Do I want to be somebody to look at all the qualities? Do I want to be somebody who sets good boundaries around their time? Do I want to be someone who loves themselves? To begin to embrace this, a new expanded vision of how you see yourself. And it can be really useful to journal about this. just with this, I want to be someone who put pen to paper, take 10 minutes and just write that down. See what comes up. I want to be somebody who loves herself. I want to be someone who no longer beats herself up so that I can develop a kind of confidence with myself. Just to free associate, put a timer, 10 minutes. Who do I want to be? I want to be someone who talks kindly to themselves. And then what can be useful as well is use an imagery exercise to just simply close your eyes, get into a quiet, comfortable state, and imagine you embodying those qualities and seeing yourself in that, in that state of who you want to be. And if that's hard to do on your own, if you don't have the help of a therapist, imagine somebody else who has those qualities and picture them, and then gradually see yourself in that image. That's a way to make a transition. If it's too
Love
hard for you right now to see yourself,
that.
who in the
Mhm.
world do you admire? Use them as your role model in your mind first.
Yes, I love that. I've even read books, like fiction books, and there's a really powerful female protagonist, and I'll be like, okay, what would she do in this situation? So
Yes.
it
Well, that's
is.
exactly a question when you're in a situation. Well, what would so and so do?
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
there's one other thing, if I can try to do this real quickly.
Please.
I know
Yes.
where one or the other, and this is just a fun practice that I know many of my clients really love, that goes along with the taking your body for a walk, which really, if you're following that, when you follow that over time, it will begin to make a difference in your level of connection with your body. I also have an audio that comes with the book. There's a link to download um, a guided visualization audio to help people connect with their body wisdom. This other practice is a very fun one where you give your body a daily gift.
Oh, love
And it's just a fun way of, maybe you want to make a list of different things that you do for your body. Positive psychology says that we see what we look for, and that is just so true.
it.
If you're
Yes.
looking for negativity, you're going to find it. If you look for things that are more uplifting, you will find it. Giving your body a daily gift begins to help you, even if it's something you give your body every day, like brushing your teeth or flossing your teeth. That could be the gift you're giving to your body that day. It could be drinking a glass of water. It doesn't have to be something extra special like a massage or um, another manicure. It could be anything like that, but it could be putting lotion on your hands. The point is to make a mindful activity, even if it takes 1 minute, and you say to your body, this is for you today. I'm
Yeah.
giving this for you today. It could be, as I'm drinking this glass of water, this is for you today. I know this water and hydration is good for you. Thank you for everything you do for me. It's just being mindful of a very simple thing where you're tuning into your body and you're giving it a gift. When we give gifts to our body gives back to us. The love we give will come back to us.
I love it. I'm telling you, this book is there's so many more things we could talk for
I know I want
an hour.
we are going over, but I wanted to add that one. It can be
Oh, I love it.
something to come up with different things. As I said, it doesn't have to be anything extra special, but it helps people reorient their relationship with their body where they're looking for things that are loving and kind to do for their bodies.
As I listen to you, all I keep thinking is whoever gets to work with you are lucky, lucky patients.
Aw, that
You
is
are
so
so
kind of
kind
you.
and compassionate, and you're much gentler than I am in my approach. Um, and that comes through in your book as well. And
Aw,
so, and in addition, as you're listening to this podcast, understand that Diane has put a lot of links to guided meditations and various other things so you can benefit in that way too. So I will put your bio and the link to your book and an offer that you're sharing with the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
You are just delightful. I so appreciate this, and I want every single person listening to this podcast to get for yourself and anybody you know the book Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. Very, very good book with so many beautiful, kind, compassionate tools for you to
Oh,
use.
thank you very much.
Thank you. I cannot thank you so much for A, writing the book, and for B, being here with us today.
It was lovely being here with you, and I really appreciate everything you've said. And it was lovely. I had a lovely time talking with you today.
You. Well, you
And
are a gem,
thank you very much.
for
And
sure.
thank you all for listening. It was nice to connect with you all listening here today as well.
And remember, friends, caring is sharing. So share this episode with anybody, whether they're in the bariatric community or not, because emotional eating is not limited to those who struggle with weight issues, whether it's underweight, overweight, any weight. It's fairly ubiquitous, meaning it's out there everywhere. So thanks again, Diane, and again,
Very
for
welcome.
check out the full Berry Aftercare program at www.berryaftercare.com. I'll see you next time. Remember, it's your health, your responsibility this day and every day. Bye bye.
Thanks again.
Bye bye.